Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Tuesday Night Hustle. Waiver wire, trades, roster management. To win in fantasy football, you must remember one simple rule. Never get out-hustled. It's the Tuesday Night Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Hey-o! Tuesday night! The beers are most certainly cracked, my friend. And you're rocking and rolling with the Tuesday Night Hustle. How we doing out there, everybody?
Is it Tuesday night, Drew?
I've had quite a few of these Blue Point what do we got? A little Blue Point IPA here. So, it's Wednesday when we're taping this. Sorry to anybody out there listening. You're probably listening to it on a Thursday anyways. But Dwain is having quite the week for himself. If you don't know, Dwain McFarland, my co-host here, celebrating his 20-year anniversary with his beautiful bride. Is that right, Dan? 20 years? Holy smokes. Congratulations.
Yes. 20 years, man. It's crazy. It's gone by so fast. We were just today going back through just old pictures of when our kids were little, when we got married. We were married almost 2 years before we had our first kid. But my oldest son, Camden, he's 17. So, yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe it. Like, really. Like, it's one of those deals like, when you don't really think about it, you can believe it. But when you really sit down and think about it and go and start looking back at the history of your relationship, you're like, man, time really flies.
Congratulations. That's a big step here. I'm coming up on 10 next year. And it's quite a big week here at the full-time fantasy.com podcast network. And why do I say that? You may ask. It's because we're members of it now. FulltimeFantasy.com. Go over there and check out all the really great stuff that they have. PlayFFWC.com is a place where you can go and play in some high-stakes leagues. You can play in some best ball contests, beat the experts. There's leagues starting for as little as $35, so you don't have to have major investments to go out and win some cold, hard cash. So Jim Day and Scott Atkins and the guys over there at FulltimeFantasy.com have started this really cool podcast network. We are very, very happy and humbled to be a part of it. You'll see the hashtag FTFPodNet, and you'll see tons of great content coming out from these shows, which is the first of two big news we want to drop here at the top of the Tuesday Night Hustle. The second has to do with my man, Dwain McFarland, and there might be things going on in your life here, Dwain. Things shifting, moving, comings, goings. You're becoming a little legitimate. What's going on?
Hopefully legitimate and not illegitimate. But, the other news, and this isn't, final yet, still working through some of the final, details here. But, I've come to, an agreement that I'm going to do some work for football guys. So I'm super excited about that. It's a site that, I've known about for a long time. I love a lot of the guys there. So more to come on that. Hopefully in the next week or two here, I'll be putting some stuff out with them. I'm so excited to hopefully be bringing some really good content to the masses. Not hopefully. We're going to do it, Drake. I'm going to do it.
Man, I'm so proud of you. That is so damn cool. Just for anyone out there who has aspired to be any kind of writer, whether it's in fantasy football or if you're writing about science, if you're writing about politics, it doesn't matter, to get recognized and paid by one of the biggest names in that field, for them to come to you and say, hey, we want you to be a part of what we're doing here, you should be, just know that you're doing great work, Dwain. And I knew it a year ago when I first met you. I said, this guy's going to be the next big thing in fantasy football, and you're well on your way to that. And it's going to be a kick-ass year for you and the podcast and for football guys and FightingChanceFantasy.com and Fulltime Fantasy Podnet. And we're all over the place, man. And tonight we're talking about something near and dear to my heart, a draft. And we are going to rock and roll here, folks. What I want you to do is head over to my Twitter page or Dwain's. You can find me at Drake Fantasy. You can find Dwain at Dwain McFarland. Spell his name Dwain. And I'll have it pinned there. I'm going to have a copy of the draft board. So you'll be able to follow right along with us and see what we're talking about. We did a draft over at FightingChanceFantasy.com. I think it was Sunday night, right, Dwain? And you and I were part of 12 writers from all across the fantasy industry who got together and did a 12-team full-point PPR draft. Now, I had the number 1 pick. Dwain had the 4th overall pick. This was only 13 rounds, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, and a flex. That's your starting lineup. Pretty basic. I know my big league that I run, that's the format for it. So you should get a really good feel after this show for where guys are starting to go, and most importantly, why. Why are Dwain and I picking guys and targeting them in the rounds we are? Why are we building our roster this way? Because anybody can go out there and go, this guy in the 5th round, that's not a value. Well, why? Who else would you have taken there? If you let him go, who would you have taken instead? Coming back around, what are you thinking? So that's a little heads up on what we're going to cover tonight. Dwain, off the top here, what are your thoughts on this draft as it's in the rearview mirror now?
Yeah, just quick housekeeping, just real quick on the Football Guys thing. Like I said, I don't know what all the terms and everything will be, but I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, jumping into this draft, it was a fun draft because I haven't done one yet this year that was this format, which is the 3 wide receivers and then 1 flex. A lot of the leagues I do are 2 running back, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and then 2 flex, which can be any one of those 3 positions. So first things first, anytime I'm in a draft where you're required to start 3 wide receivers, you have to prioritize receiver even more because there's less flexibility for people to go different ways like there is in a league where there's, you're just playing 2 flex players instead of it having to be, 3 wide receivers. So you immediately, are going to move your draft, up your draft board a little bit, your receivers, over some of the running backs that typically you may be taking in some of the same rounds. So I typically prioritize receiver. Now I will say I don't ever force anything if the value just happens to land a certain way. I'm a big believer in each draft is its own animal. You hear all these strategy articles around, 0 running back or this or that, or all running back. And you'll notice I draft with certain drafters all the time that I've drafted with for years. And it's kind of weird that their strategy doesn't really change. It doesn't evolve. And I see a lot of drafters that are like block drafters. It's like, I've got to draft 3 running backs to start every time. Mm-hmm. And so the key is being able to bob and weave. And so we'll talk about that throughout some of this. But first things first, if it is a 3 wide receiver draft and it's a full point PPR, you do have to, in your mind, you don't want to overdo it, but you got to go ahead and push the receivers up your board because people are forced to take them. Some of the guys that you're used to being there may not make it later. And, your wide receiver 3 that would be on your bench potentially before, if you're going to flex a runner instead, he has to start in your lineup. And so it's very important to understand that.
Nobody should be playing in 2 wide receiver leagues. That's nonsense. You should be playing either in leagues with 3 wide receivers or 1 or 2 flexes at that point. There's too many players out there. Everyone is a bomb squad if you're playing with just 2 wide receivers and no flexes. That's like 1980s fantasy football. Let's get out of that, all right? That's my little PSA. So it started off here. We opened the draft with me noticing I have the number 1 overall pick. And I'm looking down the draft board, and I know I've got some good competition in this draft. I'll give you the lowdown here. Here's who else was in it with us. Casey Kasem. She's a writer for Fighting Chance. Gary Haddow. He's also a writer on Fighting Chance. Dwain with the 4th pick. We had, what's the guy's name here?
The fantasy football consultant.
Okay.
Willem. Yeah.
And then Joe Galena came in here. He had the 6th overall pick. Our friend Bob Lung, Mr. Consistency, with the 7th pick. And we're fresh off of Dwain going on the WTF podcast with Bob Lung and Jim Day. So go to YouTube, put in WTF Fantasy Football, and you can watch that show. Anthony Servino, he does a really good podcast out there. It's one of the better looking that you'll see. He picked 8th. Kevin Tompkins from Fighting Chance picking 9th. Steve Rappin, not Rapin, as we made that mistake last year, from Fighting Chance picked 10th. Big Rig, you may know him from his calls to Sirius XM fantasy football shows, but he's a writer here for us at Fighting Chance. He picked 11th. And the Godfather, he sleeps 10 feet away, Ryan Hallam, cleaning things up, picking 12th. So I was on the board with 1-1. I guess you could say, you could go Barkley. and that's a no-brainer. But I did give some thought to McCaffrey. I gave some thought to Elliott. Because just because it's the consensus doesn't mean that's how it's going to end up. If we knew how this was all going to end, why would we ever play the game? But I did take Saquon Barkley at 1-1 overall. I think he's just going to get so many touches. And if Eli Manning's the quarterback, you can even read the reports now. They're saying he's not pushing the ball down the field. Everything's a dump off. Everything is short. And that could mean another 90 receptions for Saquon Barkley. I think he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. He's going to be basically the only guy in town for the New York Giants. Do you have any issue with Saquon going 1-1? Would you have gone anywhere else?
No, that's probably my pick just because that's pretty much where you have to take him. I draft multiple teams. So a lot of times when I land the pick like that, I've got to go ahead and take that player because otherwise I can't get him. What I'll say just real quickly is about the top 4 picks. They're all good picks. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. I think all 3 of them, have potential downside. Ezekiel Elliott, we don't know what's going to happen with, his fake push of the security guard or whatever. Christian McCaffrey could have an injured quarterback. Cam Newton's still not throwing. So anytime, you've got a rookie quarterback, even if it's somebody we like Will Grier under center, there are growing pains and defenses can focus more on the running game, et cetera. Now McCaffrey, a lot of his volume is really, his quote unquote running plays are really just short passes. And then you've got, Saquon Barkley. The problem with Barkley is if Daniel Jones has to start at any point this season, that scares me because that could be really, really bad on that team. So there is the risk of that. But what I will say for Barkley, Barkley is the only guy that I actually will endorse that Vegas has picked to be on a losing team that I would pick this high. And it's just because of his big playability. He's just a freak. He catches a ton of balls and, he has an ability to score from anywhere on any play. So they all have their warts, but I think, you've got to put your stake down on one of these 4 guys if you have one of the top 4 picks. Alvin Kamara actually, probably has the least risk associated with him, but he's not going to get as many carries as Zeke or as Saquon. But Kamara doesn't have any issues around his quarterback. There's no legal issues. He's going to be on a winning team. So you could argue Kamara is the safest, but I don't think he carries the upside of a Saquon or a Zeke or a McCaffrey because they just get fed a little bit more.
Yeah, I have no problem taking him there. I think he'll be the backbone of a really good squad. There's no choice there of wide receiver. You're not going to go tight end there. You're not going to take a quarterback. So you take the best receiver in a PPR, and to me it was Barkley. Let's move it on. No real surprises as we go down here. So McCaffrey comes off the board next, followed by Zeke. And now, Dwain, you're up at 4. So Kamara's on the board. Hopkins is looming out there. You could zig where others zag and take that wide receiver. Him, Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas. Any thought of going anywhere else besides where you went?
No. Once I get past Kamara, the next pick was Melvin Gordon. There's no way I would select Melvin Gordon over DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not saying that it's terrible. I'm just picking. I will actually pick Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and Juju Smith-Schuster all over Melvin Gordon. Those are my top 3 receivers this year. I think people are too low on Juju. So, that kind of sets you up for the next pick, the next DeAndre Hopkins, and then he comes back. We can talk about that in a minute. But
yeah, so D-Hop goes to Joe Galena at the 1-6 mark, first receiver off the board. If we look at his ADP according to FullTimeFantasy.com, DeAndre Hopkins is actually going at around pick 5. He's averaging 5.3 is his ADP from Full Time. So maybe a little bit of a value for Mr. Galena at the 1-6. Hopkins is going to be a target monster. He's going to probably score double-digit touchdowns. He's a pretty durable guy, and he's in an offense where the other 2 receivers don't feel like staying healthy. So I think he's going to have a great chance at having a monster season again.
Yeah, and I won't argue with anybody. If you want to mix it up with Devontae Adams, I've got Hopkins and Adams neck and neck. They're both going to get and I think Juju's right there too, to be honest. Juju's touchdown upside is maybe a smidge lower the way that offense operates, but those guys are all going to see 150 plus targets. So that's rule number 1. So once you get that, then you start thinking, okay, who has a good quarterback? Well, DeAndre Hopkins has a good quarterback. Devontae Adams has a good quarterback. Juju Smith-Schuster has a good quarterback. So those guys are, I'm fine with anybody taking any of those players there. I think those three guys, and there's a lot of people that would disagree with me on Juju, but they won't be by this time next year. Juju is the value right now. He goes in the second round. He should be going ahead of David Johnson, Joe Mixon. I'm taking him over Todd Gurley, even though I'm not as scared on Gurley as some people are. So I think getting Hopkins where he got him, is a great value. If you go to the next, 2 picks, you get 2 more runners, Drake, with David Johnson and Joe Mixon. Mm-hmm. I think they may be first-round picks. I just think it's too early. They're both – David Johnson's on a team that Vegas has got winning 5 games this season. We've talked on this podcast before about how it's really hard as a runner to hit your upside on touchdowns, or even to hit, break even on touchdowns, which is, 7 on an offense, that's going to be trailing. And if you're projected to win 5 or 6 games by Vegas, they predict you to be trailing probably 45%, 40% of the time this year. Could the Cardinals swing that back in their favor some? Yeah. And is this scheme going to be good? Yeah. I like David Johnson catching passes, but I just feel like, I don't see a path for him to get to, more than 8 touchdowns. I think James Conner can score 12 easy. Mm-hmm. So for me, David Johnson and Joe Mixon, I am a little rosier on than David Johnson, because the Bengals were bad last year because they were hurt. Everybody was hurt. AJ Green was hurt. Andy Dalton was hurt. Tyler Eifert was hurt. I guess what's new with that? They had offensive linemen hurt. They just, once all of that happened, their season just basically shut down. And so when I think about Mixon, I think about a team that's in a division where, yeah, the Browns are supposed to win it. They're the favorite. They've got all the fancy new toys, but they're not proven. The Steelers are kind of an 8-8 team. They could be 10-6. They could be, a little bit worse than that. They're going to have a good offense, but I think Cincinnati can be in some competitive games is what I'm saying. The Ravens, they want to keep things close and run the ball, so the Bengals are going to be able to stay in games. So Mixon, I think his team's going to be trailing less, so you can make an argument. And I also like the new offense that he's going to be in as well. So everybody loves Kingsbury, and that's great, but Mixon's going to be running in the Rams offense, the Rams old offense. It's going to be 11 personnel, going to be a lot of wide zone. Run plays will look like pass plays. So I actually like Mixon over David Johnson. So, we can keep going from there.
Yeah, Mixon, for everyone wants to talk about all his great receiving chops. This guy only caught 43 balls last year. It's not like he was setting the world on fire.
Well, Gio still has a role there.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, I think if you're picking at the back half of round 1, early part of round 2, you need to look at it as, in my mind, if this was me and I had the first overall pick, which I didn't like, and we'll get more into that later, I didn't like picking early in the draft. I think back here in this part of the draft, you just want to get 2 really good upside players. I'm not looking at injury risks. I'm not looking for guys who need planetary alignment for them to have seasons where their ADP then validates where I took them, and the results validate, I should say. I just want good players, okay? And I like what Kevin Tompkins here did. Devontae Adams here at the 9th overall pick. Love it. He's a guy who he's going to get probably double-digit touchdowns. He's going to be fed the rock every week, well over 1,000 yards, slam dunk pick. So now it gets interesting. And there's going to be guys out there listening in their drafts this summer who get faced with a Todd Gurley conundrum. Okay, he's staring you in the face here at the end of the first, early second. Do I pull the trigger on Todd Gurley? Steve Rappin went and got him at the 110. If you read fantasy Twitter right now, everyone thinks Todd Gurley's leg has fallen off, and the new rookie they just signed is going to be in the Hall of Fame tomorrow. Where do you fall with Gurley? I read a great tweet today, Dwayne, where even at Gurley with like 30% less of his volume is still like a top 15 running back. So would you take him there at the 110, or are you just letting him go?
I'm letting him go there because I'm basically anticipating Todd Gurley at about 20% less. Mm-hmm. I don't think his leg's falling off, but I think they do want to manage it. There's just too many fingerprints from this offseason that tell me, and all the way back to the Super Bowl and end of last year, there's just it's like the breadcrumbs, right? You just keep following them, and you're trying to find your way home. And in this case, you're finding your way home to the idea that Todd Gurley, is not, he's not going to be what he was. I think they want him to still be efficient. They still want to base much of the offense around him. But I just think, you're looking at minimum 10% cutoff of what he does. Maximum, I think, is 30%, but I put him right around 20%. So to take 20% away from him, and you can't just say, well, 20% off of a career year, 20% off of what you would typically expect an elite running back to do. And if I take that off, I'm just not quite in the range yet. Plus the chance that he does carry a little bit more injury risk now. I just like some other guys, a little bit better. Now, I think where Gurley's going now is just too far. I was in a draft last Saturday night or Friday night. It was like a $300 draft. So it was medium stakes. There's quite a few good players in it. He didn't go till 3-4. That's too late. But I think that 10-10, it could pay off, I guess. But I think there are plenty of other players that I like just as much there with if you take 20% away from Gurley, right? So like the next pick, Michael Thomas is going to be close to that. You got less injury risk. James Conner is going to be – he did get hurt last year, but it's not something that we can just predict another injury with. So I'm still going to take James Conner. Then once you get past that, I think you could talk me into – and, of course, I've already said Juju. I'm drafting Juju over him. But then when you get to the Antonio Browns and Dalvin Cooks and Nick Chubbs and Le'Veon Bells and all those guys, I think Gurley fits in that range. I think you got no problem going with him there. It just depends on how risky you want to be. The problem is to really make him pay off, to know that he's going to pay off, I think you got to wait more towards the mid-second to late second. Unless you're just thinking, it's not going to matter. He's just going to be right back to old Todd Gurley. He's going to get all the carries. He's going to get all the touchdowns. He's going to still – the biggest thing that people have to think about is it's not just about Gurley's knee. It's about McVay is elated to have Darrell Henderson because he's gone on the record even before they drafted Darrell Henderson that they've been looking for a running back, and they tried this. Remember, it was with Lance Dunbar, who was from the Cowboys. When McVay first took over, the whole idea was that he would be their little toy that they play with, and he would help handle some of the passing role. And then he got hurt, and they never really had that player on their roster. So this is something that McVay's been thinking about for a long time anyway. So I think what people have got to understand, it's not just about is Gurley going to hit his old upside because of injury or because they want to scale him back. It's also because Darrell Henderson's going to eat into his catches. You can't project Todd Gurley at like 17 or 18% of the targets this year. You just can't. Darrell Henderson's going to get in there, and he's going to get somewhere between 5 and 10% because McVay wants to use him.
Maybe this beer being 9% has something to do with it, but I just had an epiphany. Because fantasy football is crazy. People that we are not even talking about, we don't even know about right now. Well, we know about them, but the general consensus out there don't know about these people. This hit me. What if Darrell Henderson gets hurt? Okay. And Gurley's kind of limping around doing his thing. All of a sudden the Rams sign Darren Sproles off the couch. Comes in, fits the role perfectly. Darren Sproles at 85 years old, 5'6", is a fantasy savior and league winner. That is how crazy fantasy football is. I can 1,000% see that happening. But anyways, we'll move on. So that would
be funny.
Let's get to the turn here. Ryan Hallam sitting at 112 and 113. Back-to-back picks goes James Conner, Antonio Brown. I mean, if you got it, I like the idea of diversifying here, Dwain. I don't want to put all my eggs in just a running back basket, although it's very, very appealing. Saying I could go get James Conner and take your pick of Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Le'Veon Bell, Damien Williams, Marlon Mack. That's really appealing to a guy like me who's always preached running back. Let's play this game out here. He took Antonio Brown. Let's say he took Dalvin Cook. Coming back on his next pick, obviously things would change, but let's just ballpark it here. He would be looking at wide receiver ones in the ballpark of Tyler Lockett, DJ Moore, anyone on the Rams, Diggs, Watkins.
And he took the one he should. Yeah, I just think it depends on how risk averse you are. I think when you're on the turns, and it does depend on how skilled the room is that you're in. It's like when you go to play poker. I don't know if you play poker, Drake, but I love to play poker. And I go sit down at a table, and all of a sudden, if I'm sitting there And I'm like, man, there's only 2 players here that are really bad. And the other 7 of us are just trying to get into pots with that player. That's not a good table to sit at if you want to have a good ROI. Now, you don't get to just get up from the table in a fantasy draft, but it's still important to know what you're looking at here. So as much research as you can do on who you're going to be in a draft in, or if you're in with your league mates, you know how good your league is, right? You also know, is it a 10-man? Is it a 12? Is it a 14? Is it a 16? All those things matter. The bigger it gets and the more talented the room is, the more conservative you may want to play it, as far as just, I wouldn't say conservative, but being balanced. That way, what you don't want to do is to, I think, kind of where you're heading, you just don't want to put yourself into a situation where you're staring at one of your starting positions and thinking, man, I got complete blanks.
Yeah.
I got nothing. You at least want to have a guy that you can start the season with and feel pretty good about it, and then try to build your team as you go. So I don't mind it. Now, if you're in a room that you don't feel is as talented, or you're in a draft like that, man, sometimes I'll get super aggressive on the turns. The other thing I like to do on the turns is I like to try to create runs. I like, if it gets down and I'm sitting at a tier of players, and I may say, hey, there's 5 running backs in this tier left that I like. There are, 3 receivers, but I also like the next tier, as well. But then I think of the psychology of it. I'm like, man, I know a lot of people are going to have these other 3 receivers in the same tier as me. And so when I take 2 of them right here, it's going to send them into a frenzy, and they're going to start picking receivers in the next tier that maybe they shouldn't. And it's crazy. Like, I've had that happen so many times. And then the running back, when there were 5 left and it never should come back to me, it does. But again, it's about knowing your room. I think, a safe way to do it is you create balance.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I'm a guy who loves running backs, and having 2 studs is always super appealing to me. But
the problem you have here is we don't know if Dalvin Cook's a stud. We like him.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Chubb is not going to have some of the passing work. We love him. Le'Veon Bell is going to get all the work. That if you want a bell cow, no pun intended, that's probably the pick you make. We're still unsure about Le'Veon Bell's offense. There's no way I'm taking Damien Williams went in the second round of this draft. I don't want Damien Williams in the second round. So some of it comes down to folks' preference. If I'm thinking about, if I just want to make sure I'm getting points on the board down there at 12, and this may be hard. The problem with getting James Conner is you kind of, do you want to take Juju Smith-Schuster as well? But you could have had Julio Jones. Now, in this case, we know Ryan just doesn't like Julio Jones. But you could have taken Odell Beckham Jr. I would rate Antonio Brown below all those guys. But hey, each person has their own opinion of a player. So obviously Ryan's putting Antonio Brown in the same tier as those guys. And if he does, I feel more comfortable with every one of those receivers than I do Dalvin Cook or Nick Chubb or Damien Williams.
It's a good point. I agree. I'm just looking at it now, and I like Damien Williams. Okay. I'm going to say that.
You want to spend a second round pick on him?
Dude, I'm debating, and I'm not even going to lie. I'm the aggressive guy in the room here at the end of the first round. I'd take him at the end of the first.
Damien Williams.
Let's break this down.
Way.
He's in Kansas City with Carlos freaking Hyde, okay? It's those 2 guys. Unless somehow, by some miracle, they trade for McCoy, or God only knows, what happens the next 4 months. He's the guy in that offense. We saw what Hunt did in that offense, stud. We saw what Williams did in the few games when he took over, stud. We've seen Spencer Ware in a feature role here be a stud. Why are we discounting Damien Williams just because he was a journeyman guy who was in Miami?
I'll tell you why, because he's not as good as Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde is a way better player than Damien Williams. So
why is he on a new team every 6 minutes?
Well, he's been unlucky, dude. I mean, what is he going to do? The Browns sign him, and he does great in the first 6 games of the year when they suck, and then they trade him to the Jaguars. What's he going to do? I mean, he's set up to go. He's got, now I got to go learn a new scheme, and, okay, great. Is Leonard Fournette hurt? Is he not hurt? And I'm on a team that has no quarterback. So in San Francisco, he had the same thing. He always had crappy quarterbacks. Whenever he got any kind of quarterback play, the guy was really good. He's a bet. It's not close, Drake. I mean, Damien Williams, is not near as good as Carlos Hyde. And I would put some pretty good money on Damien Williams. He's going to be nice. this backfield's going to be split. Carlos Hyde is too good. And if you think back to your example of, Spencer Ware and, some of those other guys, yes, I'm a big, me, I know coaching schemes and I promote it big time. I've been talking about Andy Reid's running back since before people knew that was even a thing. So I love Andy Reid's running backs. But at the same time, whenever I sit here and look at these two backs, I can also go back and point at instances where Andy Reid has diversified across his backfield. And so Spencer Ware, whenever he was sharing with, now I can't even think of the guy's name, little fast guy a few years back, they split the roles. He's had several guys that have split the roles. He wants to give it to one guy. Damien Williams is just not that guy. And I did go back and watch every snap. The guy only had 70 carries. We don't even know what he is. And if we want to talk about a guy that's been on a roster for 5 years, it's him. And he's never been able to win a starting role, even whenever he was on a sucky team like the Dolphins. Who was ever in front of Damien Williams on the Dolphins? Okay, we had Jay Ajayi. He's burned out. Who else do we have? So, I could make the same arguments around Damien Williams. I think Carlos Hyde has shown he's a better back in the NFL. He was a better back in college. I don't trust Damien Williams to be the bell cow back in that offense.
I like that they paid him a little bit, and we might have to make a little wager here. I'm going to take a little Sigmund Bloom's money. We're going to put on the line, the Mr. Football guys, and we'll see how he comes out versus Carlos Hyde.
Against Carlos Hyde, but you're talking about taking him at 112. Let's put money on the line that he will not be worth the 112 pick. He won't be worth a second-round pick.
In my opinion, if he plays 15 games and starts 15 games for the Kansas City Chiefs, like you're telling me that if he's the 15 game, so we'll say one game doesn't start, 15 games, he's not worth a first-round pick in that offense.
You're thinking about it wrong. It's not about what games you start. It's about what percentage of the carries and the work is he going to get. He's going to share this role.
Okay, all right.
Hyde is too good. I've got Damien Williams at 200 carries. I still like the guy. That's 228 points. I've got Carlos Hyde with 120 carries. I've got Damien Williams with 55 catches. But where you're taking – I've got Damien Williams at 225 PPR points. That's what's funny. I argue with people about Damien Williams. I'm giving him a healthy dose here, but you don't take a guy that's going to score 200 to 225 points in the first or the second round. That's your third or fourth round pick. And the problem is Damien Williams costs more than that. So he won't be on my teams. If he would go in the third or go in the fourth round, I'll be picking Damien Williams. But you want to take him in the first or the second, too much risk to take on. There's too many other players. I don't have to worry about that stuff.
So the second round's all about high impact wide receivers to me. So Odell comes off the board, Julio Jones comes off the board, and our guy Juju right before you, 2 picks to Joe Galena. Joe Galena starts his draft. DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster. So let me ask you, Dwayne, you're in the middle of a draft, and there's going to be a lot of our listeners who are in this same spot, and they took Devontae or they took DeAndre, and now they're coming back. They're like, all right, well, let's see who falls back to me here. Juju is on the board. That's tough to pass up.
You shouldn't pass it up. There's no way. I'm not going to pass Juju up probably in the, first 4 picks of the second round.
Yeah.
But I just see the consistency being huge for Juju, and I'm not even projecting a lot more for Juju because of Antonio Brown being gone. I just know that his role is going to be stable. He is the guy, and Ben is a guy that's shown over the years he can play inside the timing of an offense. He can play outside when plays are broken down. That's what you want, a complete quarterback. And Ben's running the offense now. Last year, they ran more pass attempts than any other team in the league. They ran more plays than any other team in the league. So the volume's going to be there. He's going to, from a play standpoint, he's got a quarterback that loves him, a quarterback that can throw to every area of the field. I just don't know how to not like Juju Smith-Schuster. I like him over Antonio Brown. I like him over Dalvin Cook. I like him over Odell Beckham. I like him over Nick Chubb. I like him over Le'Veon Bell, and I like him over Julio Jones. All the guys that just went in front of him.
Let's remind
now,
people,
and I like all those guys. But I like Juju more.
Let's remind people, Juju Smith-Schuster as basically the 1B in Pittsburgh had 166 targets, 111 catches, over 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was the number 2 receiver in that offense. So that's just maddening to me. It's like this guy's available, and those numbers are only going to go up. So nice job by Joe Galena right there. I don't mind
Great
him.
Start.
Don't mind him passing on the runner at all. So let's get to you here in the second round. We're not going to go through every pick in the whole draft, obviously, but we're going to focus on what you and I are doing and kind of how our thought process was. So heading into this pick, Damien Williams goes right before you. You're heartbroken. You don't know what to do. You have Kamara in the first round. On the board still is Travis Kelce. Still are a couple running backs like Freeman and Mack, Mark Ingram, Kerryon Johnson. You go with Mike Evans. What made you pull the trigger on the Tampa Bay wideout?
Well, part of it is, it's what I talked about. It's a 3 wide receiver league. So you want to come away with 2 top guys and then a mid-tier guy. You only have to start 2 running backs. Now you do need another flex. So for me, it's pretty simple. And I've got a tier right here of guys that I love. I've actually got Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen's right there. He's just a little bit outside of it. But the main guys I wanted Evans, I liked Thielen, and I liked Amari Cooper, right here. And so I had Evans with the slightly higher upside. I've got them all pretty close. I think Evans, his upside is tied to his touchdowns. I don't think he's going to see the 27-28% target share. That's just not the way Bruce Arians' offense works. So Godwin's going to get his work. But he's still an explosive player that's going to be asked to do what he does really well, which is work deep down the field. And he's got a quarterback that loves to do that. And that's what Bruce Arians' offense likes to do. So I thought Mike Evans was the easy pick.
T.Y. Hilton goes off the board next. And breaking my heart here is Travis Kelce going right in front of me to Casey Kasem. I was going to pull the trigger on Kelce. Now, remember, Kelce with his 103 catches for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, this guy would have been a top 10 wide receiver. And you can get him at a difference-making position. I was 100% going to pull the trigger on him right there. He goes off the board. Nothing I can do about it. I didn't want to go Ertz or Kittle at that point. I felt if I wasn't going to get Kelce, I'm just going to wait and see who I can get later. So I go, hey, give me your boy Adam Thielen. Thielen had that tremendous run of 100-yard games last season. He's my wide receiver 1. I have back-to-back picks here, so I took the full gamut of time. And I said, well, if I'm going to go here, maybe I'm going to take another wide receiver. And I looked long and hard at Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper is going to have a fantastic season. I'm a big fan of his, especially in that offense. I think he's going to do much better than the 75 catches and 1,000 yards he had last year. I think he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. If I didn't pull the trigger on Thielen there as my receiver, it probably would have been Cooper. But again, I'm looking for balance here. So I go Thielen coming back. I know the running backs are going to be garbage when I get my pick in the 4th round. So at 3-1, I go Marlon Mack. Big Marlon Mack fan here. Still on the board was Freeman, Josh Jacobs, Kerryon Johnson, Phillip Lindsay. All solid picks, good players. It just comes down to personal preference, I guess, right there. Marlon Mack, to me, is a guy who's going to be ascending. He's a young player on a very good team with a outstanding, maybe the best offensive line in the league, elite quarterback, good play caller. Everything's lining up for him. Positive game script. Marlon Mack, my pick at the 3-1. Would you have done anything different there, Dwayne?
No, I think you had the right 2 players in your mind. I think, and I like the Kelce pick too. I thought Casey made a great pick. Casey Kasem, I'm picking Travis Kelce right there. I toyed with Kelce in my mind, and people will see later. Just my draft plan this year, unless I'm in a tight end premium league, I'm going to own Vance McDonald a boatload, and his value is so good. It just makes – and again, this is what you have to think about. When you're drafting, it's about knowing the players that you value above ADP that you're going to be able to take later. That allows you to craft your draft strategy early. It can't just be, one part of it is looking at the board and saying, okay, I need this, and what does everybody else have? Is a run on this going to happen? That's part of it. This, where are the pockets in the draft that you know you're going to get value? And we'll talk about them. I think that's where we probably need to speed up some and really spend some time there in a few minutes, Drake, is like rounds 8 through 12. Mm-hmm. Because if you feel really good about some players there, it allows you a lot more flexibility earlier in your draft, and it allows you to develop your strategy. So for me, I know I love Vance McDonald. and I know that the wide receivers and some of the runners were going to drop off, so I passed on Kelsey. Now, I still think it's a great pick. I did toy with it in my mind. Mm-hmm. As far as Marlon Mack goes, I totally agree. He's got a great offensive line. He's got a great quarterback. He's an ascending talent. This is going to be probably one of the top 5 offenses in the league. So I love Marlon Mack. I think there's an argument to be made that Marlon Mack fits right. And actually, for me, he fits right in the same tier with a guy like Nick Chubb, who's getting taken quite a bit earlier than him. I think they belong right there together in their own little tier. You could even honestly put Dalvin Cook close right there with him as well. So I think you're getting a value at the end of the round there. As long as you go into it eyes wide open that he's not going to catch a ton of passes, which that's okay. That's why Nick Chubb fits in that other role, fits in the same tier with him. Dalvin Cook fits in the same tier, not because he's not going to catch as many passes, but because he can lose some of the goal line work to a guy like Alexander Madison. And they want to kind of keep Cook healthy. So I think his carries are going to be somewhat capped. But once you get to this point, Drake, I think the rest of the runners all have questions. I think Marlon Mack's one of the ones that, even though we know Nyheim Hines is going to steal passing work, we know what his role is, and we know that he's on a really good offense. So I love the pick.
Your pick in the 3rd round is Amari Cooper. You had your choices between Cooper, Keenan Allen, Josh Jacobs, who is a guy I know you like, Kerryon, and the rest of the tight ends. What made you take Cooper?
Well, one, the position we're coming back to in a 3 wide receiver draft. If it falls right, I want to come away with 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds, unless there's a super value that comes to me at runner. And I feel really good because I got Alvin Kamara already, right? But with Cooper, I took him, and I had Keenan Allen right there as well. I took Cooper over Keenan Allen, and it comes back. You mentioned it a minute ago. You talked about how you feel like Amari's going to be a beast. If you look at Amari last year, his pace with Dak Prescott was 135 targets. His full season pace would have been 135 targets, 94 catches, 1,287 yards, and 11 touchdowns. That's 27% target share with Dak. And so now you've got the second year of Amari being with Dak. You get a full offseason. You get Kellen Moore coming in. He's not really going to change X's and O's a lot, but he's taking a lot more input from the players and what they like to do, and he's going to probably bring some more up-tempo style offense to this team. So the guy you took, Marlon Mack, I've got ranked as the team that will run the second most plays in the league this year are the Colts, and then I have 3rd the Eagles. So I mean, and think about those 2 offenses are the same. You got Frank Reich, and then you've got Doug Peterson. Mm-hmm. Well, whenever you think about Kellen Moore and the system and the scheme that he comes from, that's one thing I think he's gonna bring to this offense. So if he speeds up the tempo of the offense instead of being 950 plays to being 1,000 to 1,050, well, then half of those plays are going to be passes, pretty much, a little more than half of those plays. So Cooper could easily get to the 150 targets. And if he gets there, I mean, there are potential roads because Cooper's so good at scoring, that he ends up as a top 3 or 4 receiver. I think he's got that kind of upside. And I just don't think Keenan Allen does, because Keenan Allen's I've got to deal with Mike Williams. I got to deal with Hunter Henry. I've got to deal with, they love to throw to Austin Eckler. They love to throw to Melvin Gordon. They're a team that can just spread the ball around so much. And with Dallas, we know Amari has to get his. And look, I love Keenan Allen, but I also think there's a lower ceiling on what his touchdowns can be.
If you're an upside fantasy player out there, head over to playffwc.com. Check things out at fulltimefantasy.com. Go join some high-stakes leagues. There's some $35 best ball leagues. There's Beat the Expert leagues. There's all kinds of fun stuff, and you can check all that out at playffwc.com. So again, everybody out there, you listen to the Tuesday Night Hustle. We are part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Brian Drake alongside Dwain McFarland. You can read our work at fightingchancefantasy.com. And soon to be, my man Dwain over at footballguys.com. I mean, that's big time, man. I'm so proud of him, man. I was so psyched when I saw that text. And right now we're rolling through a mock draft that we did for fightingchancefantasy.com. If you head over to my Twitter page at Drake Fantasy, I have the pinned tweet with the link to this show, which you're listening to, and the draft board, so you can see what we're talking about. We're going to keep skipping ahead here. Let's go into the 4th round now. And you had a question, Dwain, that you posted on your Twitter page at Dwain McFarland about the turn here, right? What did you have posted?
Yeah, I just put out a question really to the masses, and I'm pulling it up here, but it was really around, hey, if you're sitting, and the reason I asked this is after doing several mock drafts and then going through a couple of real drafts already this season, I see a spot in the draft where you're going to be forced to basically plant your flag, right, or plant your stake on someone. And I think it's that we like, but they also have this kind of underbelly that you're like, oh man, that could be dark. That could be bad. There could be issues. And so if you think about once you get to the middle of the third round and you get past Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen, you really land into this spot where you're either taking receivers that are proven, but probably have, a decent floor, but limited upside due to their roles. Brandon Cook, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, all going in the third and fourth round, and they limit each other, right? It's the Rams offense. Yep. They're all going to get about 20% target share, but none of them are going to get 25 to 28. So there's not a lot of upside built into those guys. Their floors are all probably around 200 in a PPR. Their ceilings are all probably around 250. They're most likely going to be scoring between 200 and 225 points. So you could do that, but a lot of people, I don't think they feel that sexy. You could throw Julian Edelman into that same mix. But then there are some running backs, right? So you got Kerryon Johnson. You got Phillip Lindsay. You've got Aaron Jones. You've got Leonard Fournette. You've got Derrick Henry. You've got Josh Jacobs. Every one of those guys, you can pretty much come up with a narrative of why they're going to be awesome. But you can also pretty much for every one of those guys come up with an equal narrative of, man, I don't trust this, right? So if you think about Josh Jacobs, people say he's a rookie. If you think about Kerryon Johnson, okay, it's Darrell Bevel. They are going to run the ball, so we're excited about that. But wait, they signed C.J. Anderson. Oh yeah, this is Matt Patricia. He comes from the Patriots. They have Theo Riddick. Are they going to use three backs all the time like they did last year? They had Garrett Blount on the field all the time, right? Then you got Phillip Lindsay. Well, he got hurt at the end of the year, and there's Royce Freeman still there. They're going to an outside zone. Phillip Lindsay was better on inside, quick running plays. He's not really that super patient runner. And then there's Sony Michel. Oh, great. We draft Damian Harris. I still got James White. Aaron Jones has never been fully healthy. He's been electric when he's on the field, but he's never been fully healthy. And you still have Jamal Williams. They drafted Dexter Williams from, is it Williams? Yeah, Dexter Williams from Notre Dame. So there are all these narratives, right? Leonard Fournette, oh, he's always hurt. Derrick Henry still has to deal with Dion Lewis, and this team could pass more. Look at all the weapons they brought in. So you really get into this kind of question. You're going to have to determine, do you want to take one of these receivers that's more steady, or do you want to take one of these runners and take on the risk but the potential upside? And so the question I posted was really just around the runners. Okay, so if you've got to take one of these guys, who is it going to be? And I'm actually looking for it right now, Drake. But just earlier before we got on the air, it was funny to me because I didn't expect it. Aaron Jones was slightly leading the poll, and he was the one I thought people might be a little bit more scared of. And you had Kerryon Johnson at second, you had Derrick Henry third, and you had Josh Jacobs fourth, which is kind of the opposite of the way this draft played out. Josh Jacobs was the first one gone. Kerryon Johnson was the second. Aaron Jones was the third, and Derrick Henry was the fourth. So I posted the question because it's just something, I think it's an important one. It wasn't just your typical, hey, let's do a poll on Twitter. It's if you're going to be drafting teams this year, it's a question you need to think about, because when you get on the clock and these guys are all facing you, like I said, you can talk about a narrative both ways. So whichever way it's going to be for you, you need to make sure you get yourself nice and comfortable. And if you don't like any of them, you got to think about what are the alternatives. Maybe your alternative is you think about going tight end there. Maybe, you know what, I'm at a point where I don't like the upside at receiver. I'm scared of the runners. I'm going to take George Kittle, which is what we saw Steve do. Steve Rappin did. And then we saw the real fantasy guru, NFL guru, Anthony took Zach Ertz. So they kind of took that, approach to it. But I think it's just something important for people to think about, because if you look at down on the end we were, once you get past Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen, you run into a different tier of players that either A, you're not as excited about, or B, you've got a lot of questions about. So it's going to be an important part of draft strategy, and it's an area of the draft, honestly, it's probably going to go 50-50, and it's going to make or break many people's season.
My pick on that, and you and I got into it earlier today, is I like Aaron Jones. I like the new offense. I think he's going to be featured. I think he's going to score a lot more than Kerryon Johnson. and Josh Jacobs and some of these guys in maybe some low-octane offenses. I mean, just let's look at the play caller, who I think is going to be better. Let's look at the quarterback and just the style of play. So that's my vote for Aaron Jones. Let's keep rolling here. Your next pick, you started Kamara, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, and you went back to the well and filled out your final wide receiver in the starting lineup with DJ Moore. So you had still on the clock, on the board, Tyler Lockett, Watkins, Galladay, Godwin, who everybody seems to love, Landry. What made you pull the trigger on DJ Moore?
Yeah, I think the bigger decision actually there, right, is that the runners are Mark Ingram is still available. Mm-hmm. Kenyon, he went after me. Kenyon Drake, who you took. And then you got Chris Carson, you got Darius Geis, you get some other guys. Derrick Henry and David Montgomery went right in front of me. The reason I went receiver is because I think fourth round is too high for Mark Ingram right now. I love him. I love the Ravens offense, but I think, 200 carries, 220 carries is about the max, and I don't see a lot of work in the passing game. This is an offense that's going to be multiple. They have accumulated a lot of talent, and they like to use it all. We saw that last year. We saw when Buck Allen was leading the way. We saw when Kenneth Dixon was leading the way. We saw when Gus Edwards was leading the way. We saw when Alex Collins was leading the way. And even whenever, it wasn't just that, there was a rotation of guys leading the way. Each week there was a plethora of guys. Even Ty Montgomery was getting involved. They like to use 2 to 3 backs. Plus they like to run with their quarterback. So I think, the problem there is Lamar Jackson steals a lot of Mark Ingram's upside as from in the red zone or around the goal line as well. So I didn't want to take Ingram. I do like Kenyon Drake a lot. But I went with DJ Moore because it's a young ascending talent. I think when you look at the way this offense is built, Norv Turner, to his credit, did not come back and try to run the same scheme he's ran for his whole career. He learned some things in his time off, and he built an offense around this personnel. He's going vertical less. It's much more about creating, space horizontally, which both Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore do really well. But you've got Greg Olsen, who's aging. You got a first-round pick spent on DJ Moore as candidate. When I just upside for him is he could get to 26, 27% of the targets. Right now, I've got him right at 23 to 25%. Actually, I've got him at 23%. So, he could easily get to 25% of the targets, and it would not surprise me if he got to 27. So I just think it's wide open for him to be the main guy in the offense. So worst case, I miss on it, and he's a 22, 23% guy, and I can live with it. But the other reason that I did this is the guy that I've got in PPR leagues that I have in my back pocket for runner, and especially in this kind of draft, is James White. And I figured I was either getting Kenyon Drake or James White coming back. And worst case, if I had to, I was going to get Rashad Larson had to share the role with 3 people, right? It was Mike Davis, Penny, and him. So the number of guys vying to take touches is less now, and so I think Carson has a safe role, and I felt really good about it. But James White was the guy I knew I could for sure get, and that is who ended up coming back around. So again, it comes back to your strategy. I wanted to have the 3 receivers. I didn't see a huge difference between Drake and White and Carson, so I took DJ Moore.
I'm not a huge James White fan this year, so I saw your pick of him, and it kind of raised my eyebrow as I said, they
you there?
Did, I'm here. They took the running back out of Alabama. They've got Sony Michel. You still got Burkhead hanging around.
Okay.
So I'm like, so I was curious about that. I know that he had a big season, but I was like, I don't know if I want that guy as my RB2. So I apologize, anybody out there, if we're having little technical difficulties. It never stops raining here.
It's all about the setup. It's all.
So,
I think we're good.
Yeah, it never stops raining here in Syracuse,
Yeah,
New
so
York.
with James White, for me, it's real simple. I just had this debate with Fantasy Taz. He's on the same page as you. Can you hear me?
I got you. Keep going.
All right. So for me, with James White, really what it's all about is the fact that he's going to be the number 2 target. He's going to be the number 2 target in this offense. You've got Gronkowski gone. You've got Edelman as the number 1. N'Keal Harry's a rookie. He bailed us, in New Orleans. Do I think he's as good as Alvin Kamara? No, but in a PPR, oh man, I'm happy to get him. I mean, I've got him projected for 100 targets. That's 18%. He was over that last year. He was like 20%. I've got him at 80 catches, 650 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns receiving. I don't have him at a crazy projection. He's right around 200 points. But guess who that is? That's probably what Damien Williams is going to be. But people don't think about that with James White. And that's why you've got to understand who these players are. And these are the kind of players you're trying to find. Players that everybody else is off of, but that you feel really good about.
Well, that's definitely a guy this year I think people are going to be off of. And he was, at one point last year, you and I were talking, he was the freaking fantasy MVP. Let's keep rolling here. Is Casey Kasem. She went 2 quarterbacks back-to-back here. And maybe that seems a little strange in a 1 QB league, but I will tell you this right off the bat. A main league that I do every single year, this happens all the time. Somebody takes 2 QBs. They figure they can either trade one or they just want to have the 2 best people. She took Mahomes, swung back around, took Andrew Luck. She plays in a lot of 2 QB leagues. She said she was kind of looking for a little strategy to see how those leagues would play out. But trust me, folks, that's going to happen in your league. You're going to see somebody take Mahomes early. Then you're going to say, oh, I'm going to wait on a quarterback forever. And then that same person who took Mahomes or Luck early is going to come back and snipe you with their high-end backup. So be prepared out there. I know we all like to wait on QB forever, but there are people in your drafts who are going to jump ahead of you and take that high-end backup. I took Lockett and Drake. I think Lockett's going to have a fantastic season. If he can replicate what he did last year, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, I'll take that all day as my wide receiver 2. Kenyon Drake was a top 16 running back, although, God, you never know it with Frank Gore there. I think this new offense and the new coach gets him involved more and actually features him, God forbid, and he can put up some pretty good numbers again. So let's come back now. We've got Deshaun Watson, Dwain coming off the board. O.J. Howard as the 4th tight end came off in the 5th round. We start the 6th, and we see Aaron Rodgers and Baker Mayfield jump off the board to our friends Anthony Servino and Bob Lung. And then we come back up to you, Dwain, here in the 6th. And you take my boy, Philadelphia Eagles rookie Miles Sanders. And if this hits, it can really make up for if James White doesn't. But if Miles Sanders hits, boy, you are cooking with some gas, my friend. And I think I lost Dwain out there real quick. Let's see. So we did lose Dwain momentarily. I apologize for that, folks. And we will try to get him back as soon as possible. You're listening to the Tuesday Night Hustle here on the FulltimeFantasy.com podcast network. Brian Drake alongside Dwain McFarland. And let's try to get Dwain back in here. This is what happens when you're doing live radio here, folks. Things like this happen. All right. Let's see if we can get Dwain back and keep breaking down this draft. So far, if you're looking at the draft, my team from the one hole was Saquon Barkley, Adam Thielen, Marlon Mack, Tyler Lockett, and Kenyon Drake. That's my squad through the first 5 picks. Dwain's team, Alvin Kamara, followed by 3 receivers, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, James White. So in the 6th round, he and I differed here. I said, you know what? I'm going to go for tight end, and I went with Hunter Henry. I was very fortunate that Henry was still on the board, and I snagged him up there. I didn't want to have to go to that next tier of guys. In my mind, the Vance McDonalds, Ebrons, Evan Ingrams. Those are just guys I don't feel as comfortable with, although I do like Vance, and Dwain ended up picking him in the 7th round. I wanted to make sure I got him and was a little more locked in, even though, let's be honest, what has Hunter Henry done? It's not a whole lot. I couldn't go any farther down the ladder than that. Let's see. Dwain said, I can take Vance McDonald, and you know what he did? Taking him as his tight end in round 7. Apologize, folks. We're having some technical difficulties here. We lost Dwain. After that, we had a little run on tight end. So Dwain took Vance McDonald in the 7th. Then you saw Eric Ebron and Evan Ingram go off the board. I think Ebron is not going to have the year that we saw last year. There's just no way. You've got Jack Doyle coming back to the fold. He was hurt all of last year. When he was on the field, Ebron saw his snaps drastically reduced. And Jack Doyle was a top tight end. Jack Doyle's a guy you can get for almost nothing in drafts this year. You want a Mr. Irrelevant, a guy in your 14th, 15th, 16th round? Go pick up Jack Doyle. Go pick up Greg Olsen. Those guys are free, and they can return top 5 tight end value. The one thing I noticed about this draft is you can wait on quarterback forever. You can wait on tight end forever. All right, 21 quarterbacks were taken in this draft. But you want to know who wasn't taken? Brady and Dak. Neither of those guys were drafted in this league. I was really surprised by that. 17 tight ends went off the board. Jimmy Graham, Greg Olsen, Dallas Goedert among those not drafted. So if those guys aren't, you can tell it is very, very deep out there. So if you don't get one of those first 3-4 guys, I'd say Henry's the cutoff. You can literally wait forever. It doesn't matter. If you want to say, hey, when am I getting my quarterback? Patrick Mahomes went in the 4th round. In your home league, is he going to go earlier than that? Maybe. Is Andrew Luck going to go earlier than the 5th? Probably. When you're talking about fantasy experts, quote unquote, they always like to play that game of chicken, wait a little longer on the quarterback. But in your home leagues, let's be honest, you're going to see Mahomes going in the 2nd, 3rd round. People are going to pay for last year's stats. I wouldn't want to be the guy to do it, but it's going to happen. I'd much rather wait and get Carson Wentz, who went in the 9th round here, along with Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, all 9th round guys. Give me them all day over Patrick Mahomes in the 4th. Would you rather have your roster spot filled with Carson Wentz in the 9th round, or you take Patrick Mahomes in the 4th, where you could have had Aaron Jones, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Mark Ingram, DJ Moore? Those are the kind of guys you could have had in the 4th round. All right? If you're waiting until the 9th and you get Wentz, who are the guys you're filling in your receiving core at that point? Curtis Samuel, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate. I mean, come on. What are we talking about here? That's 5 to 10 points a week from a skill position player. At quarterback, the variance isn't that deep. There's no reason for you to do that. So we're having a little more technical difficulty with Dwain. We might just have to cut it a little short tonight. Just want to go through the rest of our rosters here. Dwain ended up taking a couple of nice upside receivers here in the 8th and 9th round, Geronimo Allison and Christian Kirk. If you've listened to our shows in the past over at fightingchancefantasy.com/podcasts, you know his thoughts on that Arizona offense, and you know how he thinks Christian Kirk is going to slide into the slot role, and he's going to get a ton of work in that Cliff Kingsbury offense. So if you can get Christian Kirk here as your wide receiver 5 in round 9, you're doing okay. Geronimo Allison, same thing. He's going to be that slot guy in Green Bay. He took him in the 8th. If one of those guys hits, and they can be your flex or your wide receiver 3, even though right now you drafted him as your wide receiver 4 and 5, that's awesome. That's how you play fantasy football. And he hasn't taken a quarterback yet. He waited until the 12th round, and he took Kirk Cousins. In between there, he took some upside backup plays on Alexander Mattison and Damian Harris. Now, those are guys who may have a little standalone value, Madison especially, in a redraft league, but let's say Dalvin Cook goes down. Madison's a league winner. Damian Harris. Sony Michel has proven that he's not injury averse. Damian Harris could be a guy who all of a sudden is getting 15 carries a game. At quarterback, Dwain went with Kirk Cousins, got him in the 12th round, and then finished off the draft with Albert Wilson, who, if you don't remember, was injured last year after some phenomenal weeks in Miami. Nobody in your draft is going to be talking about Albert Wilson. Another Mr. Irrelevant guy. We'll probably do a whole show on that later this summer. He's a guy who could be flex-worthy wide receiver 3 or, at worst, trade bait. And he put up some really big numbers last year. Looking at how my team finished out, in the 6th round, like I said, I took Hunter Henry. After that, now I'm looking for big-time upside. And I think I got that in Will Fuller in the 7th. Came back in the 9th with another receiver, James Washington. So those are two guys I think could be, if they hit big-time wide receiver 3s. Sandwiched in the middle of those guys is someone who we had a big discussion about offline, and that was LeSean McCoy. LeSean McCoy in this league is my RB4. Let's talk about that. RB4. Not my RB2, not my flex, not anybody I need to start on a weekly basis. He's my RB4. People were like, oh my God, McCoy, he's old, he's dead, bop, 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 bop. Folks, he's still the starting running back on an NFL team. All right, he only had 3 touchdowns, 500 yards last year. You know what? That's more yards than Leonard Fournette had. It's more yards than Frank Gore, Carlos Hyde, the Gus Bus. He's a starting running back. And let's not kid ourselves. Is LeSean McCoy going to win you a league? Hell no. But let's say LeSean McCoy gets traded. Let's say he gets cut. And he gets picked up by, Kansas City. He gets picked up by a team that needs a running back, Tampa Bay. Now all of a sudden, holy smokes, LeSean McCoy's revitalized. He's a big-time pick. 4th running back. I'll take that all day. Opportunity right there with LeSean McCoy. I ended up pulling the trigger on Phil Rivers. Dwayne and I had a conversation about quarterback. And he goes, at this tier, Dwayne says, you can wait and just take the cheapest guy. I really wanted Carson Wentz. He went 3 picks before Phillip Rivers. I think Wentz is going to be a top 3 quarterback this year. I probably should have taken him a round or 2 earlier, to be honest, to make sure I got him. But let's look at this. In the 9th and 10th round, guys coming off the border, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Wentz, Rivers, Newton. Then you're getting into the Josh Allens of the world, Cousins, Goff, Murray. And Murray's a guy, if you can get a shot at him this year, I 100% want him on the back end of my roster just to see what he can do. Kyler Murray, the quarterback in Arizona. Phillip Rivers, to me, I wanted more than Cam. I wanted more than Josh Allen, just because I know I'm going to get 4,000 yards and I'm probably going to get 30 touchdowns. The other guys, to me, Cam's shoulder falling off is a big risk. Allen, upside QB2, I'd take him there. No way I want him as my starter. Big Rig went with Allen and Jameis Winston. He'll probably have to stream those guys each week, play matchups. I like him more than Big Ben without all those weapons. Kirk Cousins, who knows? That's who Dwayne took as his QB. I just think Rivers is the safest of that tier, so I'm not going to wait till the end of that tier to get him. I'm going to go and get my guy when I can get him. I finish off my draft with Marquise Goodwin, who is the wide receiver 1 incumbent last year, I guess, in San Francisco. And if I can get him in the 11th round, why not? Adam Humphries is going to take over slot duties in Tennessee. And I finished off with Randall Cobb. Chris Herndon was a guy I liked here as Mr. Irrelevant. Jack Doyle. I didn't want to take a backup quarterback at this point. But if Randall Cobb comes into Dallas and he can be Cole Beasley, let's say he can catch 60 balls, score 6-7 touchdowns. He's flex worthy. He's a bench wide receiver. Is the upside through the roof? No, probably not. But in a pinch, you need a guy. You wouldn't feel horrible about putting Randall Cobb in your lineup in this new Dallas offense. That's about it. I apologize again for the technical difficulties. We lost Dwain, but hey, what can you do? These kind of things happen. So I want you to head over to my site there at fightingchancefantasy.com, read our work, go to fulltimefantasy.com, get on, click on their radio link. You can look at all the podcasts. There's about 13 of them there. Really good content. Check that stuff out. Look for the hashtag FTFPodNet. Go over to playffwc.com and you can get into some high-stakes leagues starting at only $35. You don't have a ton of dough. You want to get into the game. Play FFWC is the place for you. So for Dwain McFarland, I am Brian Drake. We are proud members of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, and we're glad you could join us tonight. Sorry again, folks, for the difficulties. What are you going to do? But hey, that's what happens here when you're hustling too hard out in the rain and the snow and all the weather here in upstate New York. We'll talk to you next week, guys. Find me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy and Dwain at Dwain McFarland. See you later, guys.
This has been the Tuesday Night Hustle. We're back next week with all you need for waiver wire, trades, roster management, and more. Until then, never get out hustled.
Hey, what's up?